Oh, good morning to you all. Good morning. 1st of June, 2020. I don't know about you lot. Someone asked me yesterday if I have any superstitions, and I assured them I don't. Not something that I get involved with, but a lot of people in England will say things like a pinch and a punch for the first of the month, or they will say rabbits, 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 or something equally silly to celebrate the fact that it's the 1st of June today. New month. Yesterday, for those of you inclined that way, you will already know, was the Feast of Pentecost, or as they prefer to say here, Pentecost. Little bit of, for those of you that don't know anything about Pentecost, I found myself yesterday explaining to some people the first time I heard a sermon, a lesson on the Feast of Pentecost. It was actually in Benfleet Baptist Church. I was going to say of all places, but that makes it sound like that's a strange sort of place to be. But there I was, this particular Pentecost service, and I'm embarrassed to say that I can't remember who the preacher was. It might have been dear old Reverend Reg West, might have been, but it could have been one of the others. But he explained how the apostles, the followers of the way, were in the upper room, wondering what was going to happen. They'd been given a promise that something great was going to happen. The Paraclete was going to come, and they were going to be given Holy Spirit. Now, I don't know what they expected. I don't know if they thought that Amazon were going to arrive with a parcel and they'd open it and Holy Spirit would pop out. I don't know what they thought. But what I do remember is this preacher talking excitedly about the flames going around the room as the Holy Spirit entered, burning its way, imbuing them with new spirit and new force, new ability to do things. They could suddenly speak languages that other people could understand. Wonderful, wonderful event for the people there and for those of us here today. Do I feel filled? Do I feel filled? As an aside, someone who's tried to convince me to teach them English keeps having trouble with my English pronunciation. Do I feel filled with Holy Spirit? I certainly feel full of something, and no replies to that, please. Right, what are we up to? Did any of you watch Time Team? It's a British television programme. A chap called Tony Robinson, who is best known for his portrayals of Baldric in the Blackadder series on British television. The concept of the programme is that they get involved with a project to do some archaeology, and generally speaking they visit a place where there's been archaeology going on, and they bring new resources, and they make a big thing about how they've got just 3 days to discover the secrets of whatever it is they're going to discover the secrets of. Maybe it's a Saxon burial place, or maybe it's an old Roman fort, or whatever. Now, if you haven't watched it, it's got a format to it. They introduce the idea and they say there is a story that in this part of the world there is a disused naval dock that a famous ship was built in, and we're going to talk to this historian who's been researching it. We're going to look at maps, and we're going to use aerial photography, and we're going to do all sorts of things. And there's a team of characters made for television. I don't know if they were already like it or if they took on a persona for the programme. There's a chap with long, straggly ginger hair whose name escapes me. As if anyone would have long, straggly hair. Something to do with the coronavirus lockdown. I've got long, straggly hair. So what? I don't care. And this chap wears a battered hat and he likes a pint of best bitter. And what he likes doing is getting down into a hole and digging and ferreting about. And there are other people, more academic people. You can tell the academics, they wear a bow tie. And through all of this, there's Tony Robinson rushing about. And they talk to some professor who says, well, I think what we're going to do, we're going to open a trench there. And they show a picture and they show where the old manor house and the church and the new road and so on and so forth. I say, we're going to open a trench there. And what we're looking for is whatever. Evidence of something. And there's always at the start of it a certain amount of digging going on. Generally they get a backloader of some sort that digs a hole, and then they all get on their hands and knees and they go in with little trowels and they scratch away at the dirt and they find things. And Tony Robinson runs about all over the place, giving it a sense of urgency. And he will use phrases like, what have you got to show? And they'll show you this broken piece of pot. And they'll give it to an expert who will say, this is definitely, this pot, I can tell because I'm an expert, this pot was made in 1750 and that gives us a date. There's always a certain amount of tragedy involved in it. They always run into a problem and they always overcome the problem, and they dig another trench and they take a helicopter and they use geophys. There's a chap who walks about with this sort of prongy thing with a box on the top, and he discovers disturbances in the ground. Wonderful, wonderful thing. Great fun. I probably watched every episode. I don't know what I learnt from it, but what I'm doing at the moment is very time team. So what we're going to do, I'm going to do a Tony Robinson now. I'm going to run about. I've also got to do the camera crew bit, and so my running about might be a little bit slow. Anyway, right, let's go and have a look what we're looking at. Well, I suppose we ought to try and find some local people to try and get a flavour of the history of this place. Not very many local people. No helicopters, no people doing geophys surveys. Yeah, okay. Right, what I can tell you a little bit about, if you see this building here, one of my pals tells me that that building was in the 16th century. There's features about it that people seem to think that's originally built in the 16th century. I don't know if that's true. Good possibility. This house here wasn't a house, it was actually 3 houses. It was actually 4 houses, but someone knocked the end one down for reasons known only unto themselves. And the one we're working on, no one really seems to know exactly what it was. It seems to have been built in several different stages at different times by different people. And when you work on it, you find clear signs that it's had a lot of different hands involved in in building it. It is thought by folk here that this part of the building was much modified in the 1920s, and people suggest that the people that were responsible for that were some Italian masons. Masons in the meaning of people who build things. I don't mean masons in the sense of people who shake hands a lot. They certainly did some stuff and stuck a new front on this building, and within the walls you can see the points where it's sort of glued together, or more to the point, it's not exactly glued together. There are exciting things that we could find. For example, on that building, where are we? There. That slated roof is what's left of the old tower of the old town walls. In those days, this was a particularly warlike part of the world, and virtually every town had town walls and some sort of, we'll say, castle. So there's evidence that there was indeed a tower and historic walls. Probably didn't come this way, because the town, according to the legal historical records, the town ends, where are we? The town ends there, and the country starts there. Yeah, but it would seem that the town wall didn't protect this part. These are buildings, we think, outside of the town walls. We think, we don't know. A lot of the history was lost, partly in the 1560s with the wars of religion, partly with the French Revolution in the back end of the 1700s, and partly in the various other pieces of unpleasantness that seem to mar the history here. Anyway, I digress. What we are doing, we're trying to make some sense out of getting rid of how to use a lot of hardcore, which would be a good idea. To use the hardcore, I need many yards of hardcore to build the floor. So this is the sort of Tony Robinson running about bit, and we're going to ask Mick what he's found in this hole, and he's going to sweat a lot and explain that what we've found here is a wall. Now, didn't expect that. I was always a bit curious about what this stone is all about, and that's a type of limestone, a particularly hard piece, and I've been looking at it thinking sooner or later I don't know what I'm going to do, whether I'm going to cut it flush to the wall or just leave it as an amusing little trip hazard for people in the future to stub their toe on. I think that's possibly favourite. But what I didn't expect in this muck and mud was to find evidence of a wall. Is it the town wall? No, it isn't, because the width of it, that is the sort of width that they build walls here for all sorts of buildings. How old is it? How long is a piece of string? Don't know. What I can tell you is it had been covered with a mixture of mud and stone and flints and all sorts of muck and rubble. And over the top of that, it had had about 2 inches of just plain dirt, which at some stage someone thought it was a good idea to put some concrete over. Now, when I say concrete, I normally mean sort of 4-inch slabs with reinforcing bars and all that sort of thing. No, this wasn't like that at all. It was less than half an inch of concrete and very brittle. It didn't take much persuading. And over the top of that were some clay tiles to give it a floor, because this space here, in its most recent usage since the 1940s, was used as the carve, the place for keeping bottles of wine and such likes. When I lifted the paving stones, if you like, floor tiles, I found some interesting things. The first of which was a little coin, and that made me squint a bit. It's a half franc, a French coin. It's dated 1965. So that, where it was, must have been placed there by whoever placed the floor tiles. Possibly. It could have simply been dropped, but where I found it, I suspect it was placed there deliberately. So it would seem that the floor tiles were last lifted and laid in the 1960s. Well, I had a little dig and a little dibble about, and then I found this, and it's very, very difficult to see what it is in any light, particularly not in this light. And it's an Italian coin. Can we see the head on that? I'll probably have to take a picture of it later with some spotlights on. King Umberto or whatever of Italy. Where that was placed, I suspect it was put there deliberately. It was in the mud that was beneath the floor tiles. An Italian coin. I think I checked the date on this. I think it was 1895, 1897, something like that. Very difficult to see it, but it gives us a clear Italian connection. So at this point, Tony Robinson will turn round to an expert and say, "Are you excited about that?" Well, yeah, I am. I think it goes to confirm that some of the building work here was done by Italians. Otherwise, there's no reason for an Italian coin to be here. All we can say is the work was done after the coin was made. We don't know whether it was 5 minutes after, or 5 years, or 50 years after. We can very quickly check on the life and times of King Umberto of Italy. Umberto. While I'm making tea, you might want to do that on Wikipedia. From the accounts I've read, he wasn't actually a very nice chap. And long and the short of it was, he was assassinated by a chap who shot him 4 times. And it sort of seems that not too many people were that upset by that. But anyway, I'm going to, as I say, I'm going to make a cup of tea, of course, and then I shall carry on excavating this wonderful site. It is not a royal tomb, it's not a castle, it's not a monastery. It's going to be my living room.